Hello and welcome to The Man Who Kept Dying. In today's video, I would like to cover chapter 6 of the novel The Man Who Kept Dying. Chapter 6 is titled The Snake, and it's about the encounter of Mika, the main character in the novel, with a snake. As you would have started to understand if you watched the previous video on chapter 4, or if you've already read the novel, there are some chapters in the novel that are narrated from a different viewpoint than the main character's viewpoint. So all the story is narrated from the point of view of Mika, the main character, except a few chapters in which the viewpoint will change to elements or to something that happened to Mika, but seen from the viewpoint of something else or somebody else. And in chapter 4, it was all about the viewpoint from a car that led to a car accident. In chapter 6, it's about a snake encounter. And chapter 6, to give you the real story behind it, because most of the novel is also inspired from events that have taken place in my own life. Chapter 6 is when I was a little kid and growing up in Africa, of which I have beautiful memories of living in nature, and really nature was so abundant over there. It was really lovely. But also lots of animals over there and some dangerous animals. There were snakes in Africa, some of them quite dangerous or highly venomous. And it's a story that happened to me when I was a little kid. I don't remember the exact age I was, probably between 6 and 10 years old. I basically found myself face to face with a snake in a very strange situation. To give you a bit of context, I saw the snake in the garden a few days before that encounter. I was playing outside on the terrace and I started running in the grass. I don't know what I was playing, something in my head, but the grass was quite tall where we were, and I just start running. I see like a kind of a green shape that's sneaking in front of me, and I'm about to step onto it. And I realize that I'm about to step onto a snake, and if I step onto the snake, of course it's going to turn back and try to bite me. So as a kid, I stopped, I ran in the opposite direction, I went back inside the house, closed every door because we used to live with doors open. The climate was always very warm and nice. And I was like, nope, don't want the snake to get inside the house whatsoever, so I'm not risking it. A few days later, I think it was at a weekend, I had one of my friends with me. There were my parents, my younger sister, and we were about to start lunch. So we put all the cutlery on the table in the dining room, and it was an open living dining with a kitchen in the background. Doors were open to the garden and the terrace, and there were not enough chairs on the table because my friend was there. So I pick an additional chair in a corner, and as I pick it, I feel it's a bit heavier than usual, but I don't really pay much attention to that. I put the chair next to the table, everyone sits, I sit on the chair, and I have that intuition that I'm being observed. So what I do is that I look down to my right, and I see a green snake coiled on the leg of the chair that is looking at me with its dark black eyes. It did not look aggressive in the slightest, but I had no idea what I was facing. All I remember is that I panicked and I just jumped out of the chair, ran as fast as possible to my bedroom screaming, "Snake, snake, snake." And of course at the time, people had a bit of a moment of pause, thinking what is happening? And another thing that I shall mention is I was doing a lot of jokes when I was a kid. So my parents at first really thought that it was one of my jokes, and I was just acting and pretending that there was a snake, but there really was not any snake or any danger. So for a few seconds, basically, they did not believe me. However, given how far I escaped and how far I went into the house, my dad started to think that there was something strange. But it's actually my friend who just was sitting to my left, who started to look at it and saw the snake too and just ran away screaming, "Snake!" too. So basically, at that moment, my parents knew, like, yeah, there was a snake in the property. The strange thing is we don't really know how the snake got there, because it could not have been in from the kitchen. My mom was in the kitchen and my dad too. It could not have been from the living dining, because we were playing there with my friend before and my sister before we had lunch. So we would have seen the snake coming in anyway. What we suspect is my mom had temporarily opened one of the windows just next to the dining room, and just below the window on the outside of the property, you had like beautiful hibiscus flowers and shrubs. And it's very possible that the snake actually managed to get on top of those and then fell onto the floor by the window, realized it was perhaps not in the right place, because snakes by nature don't tend to go into people's property. They're quite fearful of humans, and try to find a way to escape. Could not, so just like try to hide. Except that a green snake on white tiles and a black chair is not really a good camouflage. What happened next with the snake is my dad grabbed a machete that he had when we were living in Africa. And the machete basically can be very useful just for opening coconuts. I'm not saying it's used for anything else. But he basically went and killed the snake. And the snake tried to escape, and yeah, it wasn't nice to see the aftermath of the scene. And I can't blame my dad for what he did, because he just reacted on instinct, and probably not knowing if he was facing one of the quite dangerous snakes or not, decided that he would kill it to protect people around him. I think today, with all my understanding, I would try my best to avoid killing the animal, but I appreciate that there are some situations where it might not be too easy to avoid that situation too. So, no judgment please on that front. We were living in the 80s. That's what happened at the time. That was the judgment at the time. And what does it have to do with the novel? Well, in the novel, I translated the later part of the story from the viewpoint of the snake. Though the snake actually is quite curious, because it's been living in the garden of that property for quite a few days. It's been hunting prey. And what the snake has observed is that, and which is true, and which was true at the time, the snake observed that you had what are called agama lizards, which are like quite big lizards that were running inside and outside of the house constantly. And this is true. This happened a lot where we were living, because, as I said, we had the doors open all the time. Those big lizards were very fearful. They were not dangerous creatures at all, but they had a tendency to just get inside the property, and as soon as they would see someone, they would just run away, literally by skirting the walls until they could find an exit, and they were very fast at running. So from the viewpoint of the snake in the story, the snake is very curious to know what's inside the property, and the snake just, in a very rational way, thinks that if the agama lizards, that are quite fearful animals, have the courage to go inside the property and explore it, then why could he not? So the snake decides that he would devise a plan to get inside the property, and is not willing to really try to get inside one of the main entrances, until the day he finds one of the windows being opened, start to have a look inside the property, and decides that he's going to explore. Except that as soon as he enters the dining room, he realizes that he's moving on a slippery floor. He cannot really camouflage itself the way it wants to. So that leads to the situation of where it tries to hide itself, but gets found by a very young Mika. And there is that connection with Mika where basically Mika is facing a potential dangerous animal that represents death. And that is the theme of the novel, understanding the afterlife for Mika, especially, who's been fearful of death all his life, but who's had so many encounters with death that he doesn't really understand what the connection between him and death is. And the rest of the story, from the viewpoint of the snake, really unfolds, as I've just told you, happened in real life. When I wrote that chapter, I had to really do a lot of research about snakes and what sensory senses do they have. And this is quite different to humans. For example, yes, they do have a sense of smell, not as strong as we do. They do have a sense of hearing that is very different from us humans. So they will hear vibrations and frequencies. And the louder the vibration, so for example, footsteps, is a good indication for them that they need to move away. So I had to translate all those elements into the novel by incorporating from the viewpoint of the snake how a snake would actually feel in that story and what sensory inputs will the snake receive in order for that chapter to be credible. So that's a bit of insights into how it happened. And another insight that I can share too is that I didn't write the novel in a linear chronological way. Actually, I started by writing all the life chapters. Those chapters inspired by my life experiences. And then, once I had all the chapters, the story just naturally of shifting constantly between the physical world, Earth, and the metaphysical world, the spirit side, just happened very naturally. There is another chapter in the book about Africa and another dangerous animal living in Africa. It's the last chapter of the book, the epilogue, so I'm going to save it for last because I'd rather present you the chapters in a chronological order for the purpose of that video series, but I will do that too. Life in Africa was not dangerous in the slightest, not from the animal, not from the geopolitical context, but I was a kid. I've got really good memories of it and really good appreciation for that time of my life that gave me a completely different perspective on life. Anyway, that's it for chapter 6 in the novel. It's a short chapter and it's a chapter that Mika's guides are using to try to bring Mika to the attention that there is a strong relationship in his life with death and that he needs to understand that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the insights. Looking forward to sharing more with you in the next one. Until then, have a great rest of the day, of the week, of the month, of life, however long you want it to be. Enjoy. Sending my love to you. And as usual, I will keep that one. Until next time. Be conscious, my friends.